The phrase conservative revolution made its first appearance in a 1927 speech delivered by the Austrian writer Hugo von Hofmannsthal. After World War II, it was picked up by the Swiss essayist Armin Moller and the French historian Louis Dupeux. It described the fears and aspirations of certain notorious right-wing intellectuals in the wake of Germany's Spartacist uprising and the so-called Two Red Years in Italy. For Moller and Dupeux, however, conservative revolutionaries were not merely anxious to turn back the clock. Their aim was above all to enlist the anti-bourgeois and anti-liberal fervor harbored by the radical left for reactionary purposes. While he revisits existing work on the German conservative revolution of the 1920s, Jean-François Bayart primarily seeks to treat the phrase as a Weberian ideal type, whose relevance extends far beyond interwar Europe. In our interview, the French political scientist begins by describing the conditions that produced what was initially a mindset among both reactionary opponents of the young Weimar Republic and Italian futurists who would soon support fascism. Bayart then presents his own historical and comparative approach. As he emphasizes, the most distinctive feature of the conservative revolution is its oxymoronic imaginary. Its promoters call for radical change, but only to restore ancient hierarchies. They dream of merging man with machine, as in the case of Ernst Jünger, but only to revive human spirituality. Revolutionary conservatives resent the leveling they associate with their era, caused, they believe, by the commodification of social relations and the democratization of politics. Thus, they glorify a past and traditions that are often largely invented. At the same time, to revive this past and these traditions, they rely on the most advanced technologies. The conservative revolution Bayart describes is typical of the transition from an imperial regime to a nation-state. It is not that of an empire confident in its genius and determined to project itself globally. Thus, it should not be confused with its homonym, the conservative revolution led by Margaret Thatcher and Ronald Reagan at the turn of the 1980s, which was still a version of post-war liberal imperialism rather than a symptom of its decline. While often bellicose and harboring expansionist ambitions, conservative revolutionaries nonetheless claim that their goal is to regenerate their own people and enable them to regain full sovereignty over the land to which they are entitled. The main sentiment informing their project is not the arrogance of a dominant power invested with a civilizing mission, but the resentment of a historically wronged nation. To make things right, revolutionary conservatives seek revenge on treacherous rivals, but also to rid their societies of internal enemies. At the end of World War I, Bayart explains, various instances of conservative revolution arose from the breakdown or decline of empires, whether Wilhelmine, Austro-Hungarian, Russian, Ottoman, or British. In addition to Germany and Italy, Turkish Kemalism and Chancellor Dollfuss's Austro-fascism also fit the conservative revolutionary model. The same is true to some extent of Zionism, especially in the revisionist variant of Vladimir Jabotinsky. After 1989, Bayart continues, disappointment with the outcome of the Cold War bred a new generation of conservative revolutionaries. This description applies to Vladimir Putin, whose project to reconstitute the Russian world took shape when the West refused his request to join NATO. It also applies to Recep Tayyip Erdogan, for the Turkish president turned his dream of a new Turkey into a conservative revolution when France and Germany signaled that his country was too Muslim to join the EU. A similar pattern can be found in Narendra Modi's India, and more recently among the military regimes in the Sahel, as well as in the new Senegalese government. In all these cases, social conservatism, ethno-religious nationalism, and the rollback of civil rights are wrapped in an anti-colonial pride that gives these regimes their revolutionary character. In Iran, a country Bayart has studied extensively, the Islamic Revolution became a conservative revolution after Ayatollah Khomeini's death. Without abandoning the aim of resisting U.S. imperialism and Israeli expansionism, Tehran's leaders largely gave up on their hopes to export their model throughout the Muslim world. They focused instead on the exaltation of Iranian nationalism, including in its pre-Islamic dimension. Finally, the U.S. is both the latest and perhaps the oddest case. Though victorious at the fall of the Soviet Empire and hegemonic in its aftermath, America has now shunned the liberal claims of the Cold War era. It is experiencing a genuine conservative revolution. Indeed, the Trump regime longs to restore the greatness that the New Deal, the civil rights movement, and contemporary woke culture have allegedly tarnished. Consistent with the oxymoronic imaginary distinctive of conservative revolutions, MAGA combines the nostalgia for an imaginary past with a techno-futurist utopianism. This promoted by a circle of libertarian billionaires. Jean-François Bayart concludes by pointing out that similar resentments and fantasies among conservative revolutionaries do not always bring them together, as attested by the reckless war that Israel and the United States are waging today in Iran. Our interview took place in Paris on March 13, 2026.